Liz Crosby here with some yogic philosophy. Today I'm going over the 8 limbs of yoga. And these are very similar to the Eightfold Path of Buddhism. And you follow the Eightfold Path to eradicate suffering, which is caused by desire. In yogic philosophy, all suffering is caused by the illusion of separateness or ignorance of our oneness. This is avidya. And then this ignorance then spawns the ego, the asmita, because the ego is the false self that identifies with these attachments to Maya, which is really us. The holographic projected reality is us. We are all one body. And so the ego has its likes and its dislikes, its rajas and its deveshas. And because we become so attached to the specific desires in our emotional body, our desire map, if you will, then we become fearful of death, ABHINIVESAH. So this is what we are working to break away from. The kleshas are what cause suffering. And in order to alleviate and eradicate suffering in our life, we follow the 8 limbs of yoga. And the 8 limbs of yoga are like spokes on a wheel. So you'll want to familiarize yourself with each one individually and then progress to working all of them simultaneously. The first one is the outward observances, or the yamas. Now, yama means god of death. Sounds kind of morbid, I know. But when you're constantly focused on what's happening outside of the self, again, like I mentioned before, with the desire map and our egoic identification with our desire map, then death becomes something to be feared when you're constantly looking outside of the self. So the outward observances are really crucial, because if you are engaging with your external environment in such a way that causes more karmas to accrue, then you can't get anywhere. You're constantly accumulating karmas. It doesn't matter how good you are at clearing karmas and purging, you keep breaking even. Or again, if you're not practicing the alchemical process at all, then you are enmeshing yourself in more quantum entanglement. So the yamas are ahimsa, which is non-violence. And remember, so if you cause harm to anyone in any way, shape, or form to another person, that person is actually you. And that energy it's kept in an inventory collectively, because we're all the same self. So everything is energy, everything has consciousness. That energy is going to come back around to you in some way, shape, or form. And so that's going to set you back too, because if you harm another, then you have to intake that harm as it incurs upon yourself in some way, shape, or form. There's no coincidences. It may not be from the same person, most definitely won't be from the same person. Maybe sometimes it is, but more likely, more often than not, it's from another vantage point that's unsuspecting. And so ahimsa is really, really crucial, but also you want to think about your own physical body too. So if you cause your own physical body harm, you're also causing harm to the collective, because we're all the same self. So if you cause any harm whatsoever to yourself, even thinking negative thoughts, it's like that energy reverberates throughout the whole universe, the whole universal grid, because there's no separation. So you have to kind of keep all of these things in mind as you're going about this process. Satya, truthfulness. And again, if you speak in such a way that causes harm or is promoting falsehoods, then it is all saved in the collective database that is the Akashic Records. And you have to consider that even if the people that you are speaking of or institutions or whatnot, even if they're not connecting themselves, everybody eventually connects to universal consciousness, everyone. So by telling lies, the whole consciousness indeed knows about it, if they don't know about it now. So you might be able to get away with it utilizing manipulation and fabricating a false narrative, but in the end, nobody gets away with it, because everything is energy and everything is consciousness. So I can actually feel people come in and listen through me, which is why I can't handle it. If you're gonna gossip, go somewhere else. Don't go to me, because I'm like a live wire, and I feel the person coming, just don't do it. Then we have ASTEYA-NONSTEALING. So again, if you take something from another person, then that energy has to come back around to you in some way, shape, or form, which again is going to pull you off of the path. So it's really crucial that you don't steal from anyone or anything, and that way you don't have to incur the bad karma in the future, which will slow down your process of burning up karmic debris and processing karmic debris. So again, you don't want to set yourself back. These are really important to follow. And what's interesting too is as you continue to expand, you might realize that you're stealing from Mother Earth in ways you didn't even know, especially if you're born in a first world country. There's a lot of people that have to work day in and day out to create the products that we consume. And you may realize that you're stealing life force energy from another being who is also you, even though it's far removed. You see where I'm going with this. So APARIGRAHA is non-hoarding. And just like we talk about with physical material objects, you don't want to let your mind be spinning on the same spin cycles about things that are out of your control either, so that you can save that energy and save that focus for your practice, for your expansion, and for being present and finding peace in your vessel. Because again, everything is us. Everything is us. So if you have these limiting thought forms on spin cycle, it doesn't just affect you, it affects all beings. And yes, the internal investigation of self will help you to rid yourself, evacuate, and expunge all of the stagnant energy that we are inherently hoarding, because we are all incarnating in physical forms here. Then Brahmacharya, dwelling in the vastness of creation. This one is special for me. I never was really that into sex. I was more into surfing, but oh boy, I did a whole video on this. I had to delete it. There were too many comments that were just not in alignment and leading people astray. But essentially the Kundalini energy feels so good. And this one too, it's all about that expansion. So we are following the middle path as we go on this journey with the 8 limbs. And so don't repress that energy, of course, because when you repress it, that's when energy comes out in weird, convoluted ways. But know that as you continue to practice and learn how to conduct energy, then you can go back to those experiences and they may not elicit the same pleasure that they did before, because the Kundalini energy is actually better. It actually feels better. It's amazing. I know so many people think that nothing's better than, but that's exactly why so many tantric yogis refer to the orgasm, because there's nothing better than Kundalini. But the closest thing they say that just barely comes close is the sensation of the orgasm. So, but remember, we want to expand that sensation so that every single cell of your body is experiencing the orgasm. It's not localized in one region. And then again, of course, you're able to conduct energy through the spine so that you can prolong the sensation of this full body orgasm for long, lengthy periods of time. So hopefully you're beginning to see how the Kundalini energy eclipses that, and it no longer rules you, I should say. But again, follow the middle path on that one. All of them, really, really important. That brings me to the niyamas, the inward observances, because when you're gazing inwards, then death is not something to be feared. I love how Abraham Hicks likes to kind of poke fun at death and how much energy we lose about it. Again, back to ABHINIVESAH, the fear of death is one of the kleshas, so it does create suffering. But when you gaze inwards, you realize that everything is energy, everything has consciousness, and the only constant is change, prakriti. And so more often than not, the death experience manifests, and well, it always does. 100%, you and I are going to die one day. But what ends up happening is we reincarnate back into another vessel with the same exact karmic signature. So all of it is right there waiting for you when you come back in, right? Where there's no way out but through. And so the niyamas are the process of how we disentangle ourselves from the karmic debris, which keeps us trapped in this cycle of suffering and keeps us reincarnating back in. some people call it the prison planet, but I do believe we will be able to transform the whole dreamscape, and it's going to be quite the opposite. So the first niyama is sausha, and you've got to have pure intentions. Right? You don't want to do this for self-seeking agendas, because the more Kundalini energy you flow, then of course the more power you have, and if you use it to orchestrate your own self-seeking agenda or ulterior motives, then the karmic debris that you'll accumulate from doing that will be exponentially greater than if you didn't have that Kundalini energy conductivity. Very, very crucial. So we're doing this to connect to oneness, the eternal soul, universal consciousness. Then of course we have Santosha, and this one's crucial too. So don't worry about those landmark spaces, like being able to grab your toes or your foot to your head in a scorpion or a press handstand. Doesn't matter. As long as you're expanding space, even just a little bit, that is beneficial to the collective consciousness. It really, truly is. Even if you just go a little tiny millimeter deeper in the triangle pose and you get a little tiny bit more expressive, that is benefiting the universal grid, which is all of us. It's kind of a trip to think about how the microcosm is the macrocosm, but as you continue to hold more space, that energy, it comes barreling through the central axis and then radiating out of crown chakra like a fountainhead, and it elevates the vibrational frequency of this shared reality that we're all experiencing together as one. So the last three niyamas are actually the three branches of Kriya Yoga. Tapas, Svadhyaya, Ishvara Pranadhanat. Tapas is heat for purification, and the ancient sages literally say you cannot reactivate new nadis without burning away the impurities first. Not to get too biblical, but Jesus blesses with fire. Fire burns away the stagnant information, and it is considered to be the Agni, the digestive fire. So again, we kind of have to go through it. And the fire actually feels really blissful. I think that there's a lot of misnomers about the fire that were intentionally incepted into our collective consciousness to create fear around the fire, because the fire is literally like the start button for the alchemical process. Again, the karmic debris has to kind of be roasted. It reminds me a little bit of Comedy Central's, the roasts of the various celebrities that they do. You're kind of roasting yourself a little bit. So you kind of have to have a sense of humor about it and just witness whatever's meant to come up. And then Svadhyaya is self-study or discipline, because it does take discipline to actually light yourself on fire. And then you want to send the breath in to go and retrieve that new information. The breath is the inner space cosmonaut, and it retrieves information through the cardiovascular system, takes it back into the lungs so that we can burn it up again as the fire of solar plexus rises up to meet it, the karmic debris hull, and then it burns it up into smaller bite-sized chunks, organizes it, and then sends it through throat chakra for witnessing and processing with throat chakra, which is a sattvic guna, a processing element, sound. And right, sound is ether, sound is the ethereal body. And then you can actually process it with third eye and burn it up and release it out through crown. So after you've studied yourself, you've studied that part of yourself that hasn't received the light of solar plexus in who knows how long, then you can send that energy through, and it won't be an attachment anymore, causing the deviation out towards the attachment to Maya. That energy will allocate back into the central axis and therefore raise your vibration and the vibrational frequency of the collective consciousness. So this is the Ishvara Pranadhanat, devotion to all that is, or devotion to, for lack of a better word, again, God. Again, all is energy, all is consciousness, and the divine spark is in each and every one of us. That's why we say namaste at the end of every practice. So I don't want to get too religious, but you could use the word existence as a surrogate if you prefer. So that's the niyamas, the inward observances. And again, when you start to become familiar with this process, then death is not something to be feared anymore, because you realize that your attachments to Maya are exactly that. They're not you. You aren't the attachments. You're not the addictions. And so you understand how to free yourself, and therefore death is not something to be feared. Asana is asana for a reason. Third limb is the physical posture, and I know I used to fight it too for the longest time. I was a philosophy major back in college, and I didn't want the asana to be important. I wanted to just sit and study all the time and cozy up with my latte and read books. I didn't want to have to do the physical work. Although I did have a little bit of sports background, I actually worked to my detriment. I had a lot of muscle tension in places that I had to work out, so I had to familiarize myself with the alchemical process to be able to work out that muscle tension and create flexibility where there was none. So there's hope for you guys. I was the Tin Man when I started. I really was. But the asana is important because the breath, it hitches a ride. The spirit hitches a ride on the oxygenated blood flow patterning system that is the cardiovascular system in your body and space. So if you're not actually holding space with your physical body and space, then the spirit cannot get there to extrapolate the new information regarding the space in your microcosm that needs to be witnessed. So it's important. It really is. And you cannot negate it. And this is really crucial. And I think it has something to do with the way that we've removed ourselves from nature, right? We're not nature. We're separate from nature. We're just the observer. Yeah, we're the observer, but we're also nature. The body and the mind are inseparable. There is no separation. And you're not the body, but yes, you also are the body. And the body, it keeps a perfect inventory of all the thoughts that you're thinking, right? All of the stuff that makes you up, the bones and the muscles and the tissues, they react, they respond to all of the thoughts that you think. And so this is how we can catch ourselves red-handed thinking limiting thought forms. As we move to eradicate muscle tension, that's when the limiting thought forms come up to be witnessed and processed. And then you can dive in, deep dive with the breath, which brings me to pranayama, the fourth limb. Pranayama is breath work, or I also like the translation energy work. So the breath then navigates into the space as you hold space. And I should mention also about asana. It's both masculine and feminine, and that's another distortion I think that has been heavily laden into our culture that has caused the inhibition of the Kundalini activation as a culture. As we think of yoga and we think of gaining flexibility, we don't necessarily think of creating strength. And you do need to create strength to fortify all of that space that you create, but also so that you can harness the energy up. If you just have a bunch of open pipes, you're not going to be able to channel energy through them. So really, really important. Sthira Sukhamasana, a yoga posture, is a steady and comfortable pose. So that being said, when you're able to actually send the breath there, that's when the breath can go in and extrapolate that information. That's energy work, that's pranayama. And we always breathe the ujjayi, which is proud conqueror's breath, but there are many breathing techniques. So I will be doing a series of pranayama techniques, and they're all very useful. This is a good limb to work individually too, because you'll strengthen all the muscles in and around the lungs, and they'll just kind of know what to do. When you go about your yoga practice, you can really focus on the alignment in your asanas, and your lungs will just kick into gear and know exactly how to optimize their ability to absorb oxygen in the cardiovascular system. So pranayama is really important, and the air also carries with it lots of information. It's considered to be both a rajas guna, which is transformative, and also a sattvic guna. So it processes, it creates the sound as it glides across the back of the throat. It also is considered to be very vata dosha, which is informative. It carries information that the body has to tell in this fine grain-like substance. It's much like a film reel, the old film reels, not the digital movies of today, but the old film reels that have information on them. It takes that up to third eye for witnessing and processing. So I'll put out a series of pranayama videos, very, very calming for the mind, but also be aware that pranayama, as we start to move up the 8 limbs in chronological order, the 4th limb can be very addictive as well. And so often we think of addictions with our external environment, but some of the inner technologies it begins to activate can also be addicting, and even more so in some regards. So breath work can elicit a really beautiful sensation, experience internally, and sometimes it's likened to the psychedelic experience, and it is so fun. So it's easy to get hung up on. So don't let yourself deviate or stray from the middle path. Stay focused on continuing to rearrange the tamas, gunas, earth and water into ever more complex sacred geometric design so that you can conduct more Kundalini energy through your central axis. And remember to utilize the pranayama as an alchemical tool in your repertoire. So pratyahara-withdrawal of the senses is the 5th limb, and this is kind of considered to be the intermediary between the first 5 and the last 3. So the last 3 are considered to be very esoteric, very subtle. Kaivalya is the last 3 grouped together. And pratyahara is not turning your senses off. In fact, it is spiritualizing your senses. When you redirect the energy of your senses inwards, so you can process the stagnant energy as it's coming up to be witnessed, the senses become fine-tuned, and you'll be able to receive information from your external environment with more exquisite acuteness. And that also plays a role too into how the attachments will just slowly fall away like dead snakeskin, because you may have the most delicious experience with the thing that you're addicted to right when the snakeskin falls away. That's not uncommon, because the Kundalini energy is still better, and it's almost kind of like Kundalini is flaunting its stuff and letting you know, like, here is that thing that you were attached to. It ruled your life, and here it is in its most exquisite form, and you're experiencing it with the best senses that you can possibly experience it with, and it's still not as good as Kundalini activation. So that's all part of the process as well. It's a really prominent part of the Bhagavad Gita, or very commonly cited, where Arjuna asks Krishna, so will my senses be dulled by this process of gazing inwards? And he says, no, quite the opposite. They will become spiritualized. And of course, we have inner senses that start to activate as well. So I'll let you dive deeper into that. The last 3 are dharana, dhyana, samadhi, concentration, meditation, and ecstatic joy, supreme bliss. So these ones get really esoteric. Hang in there with me. And again, they are in a chronological order. They become more and more increasingly esoteric and subtle as we move from the 1st limb to the 8th limb, but they are still spokes on a wheel. So don't forget that you are eventually going to be able to practice all 8 all at once. So dharana is considered to be concentration. So often it's affiliated with the dristi, which is the gazing point in yoga. And what is the dristi? When you are comfortable and you can close your eyes, it's the space between the eyebrows. And so the space between the eyebrows is 3rd eye. And in order to activate 3rd eye, you have to have a working awareness of the bandhas, the energy locks, so you can send a consistent stream of energy through your central axis and therefore activate 3rd eye while you're practicing. Trust me, it's really, really fun. And it'll give you the most epic excuse, motivating factor to do core work. So the bandhas are energy locks, unions between the chakras. Mula bandha is root chakra, sacral chakra. Uddiyana bandha, solar plexus, heart chakra. Jalandhara bandha, throat chakra, brow chakra. And those are the tamas gunas, the rajas gunas, and the sattvic gunas, respectively. The consistent stream is likened to pouring oil. And so if there's a break in the oil, then the 3rd eye isn't able to activate consistently. And that is crucial. So it's great in terms of keeping you accountable, because once you find that 3rd eye activation consistently in your practice, as soon as you disengage your bandhas and you lose that consistent stream of energy through your central axis, the visions become fuzzy and imperceptible. And so then it reminds you, oh, I either need to do 2 things: engage my bandhas, and there's some break in the connection in my bandhas, or then of course you can come back to the breath. Sometimes the breath becomes scattered and not fully as rigorous as it could be. And so it's usually one of 2 things. So it's a nice way to keep yourself in check and make sure that you are, in fact, engaging your bandhas, your energy locks. Another thing about dharana is once you do achieve dharana concentration, the wisdom of your past lives is gained. This is, I could do a whole other video on this, and I probably will. But for the time being, that is some very useful information. I know it's all about be here now and the power of now and just be present, man. And it's all happening right now. Everything is happening right now. And so the attachments in your field are causing deviations which are manifesting as your past lives and your future lives for that matter. And our unwillingness to hold space is causing pain and suffering, not just in this life, but also in our past lives and in our future lives if we choose to not address the emotional body. So this is very useful information because modern day is also useful. You can always assess how the deviations are affecting your interpersonal relationships, your interaction with your external environment. Sometimes in past lives, things are a little bit more egregious and intense and amplified, and so it makes it much more obvious to be able to discern how that distortion is causing deviation and therefore unnecessary pain and suffering in the external environment. And also I should mention that you are able eventually, when you can find this consistent stream, activate third eye and process, you can access the universal consciousness and come back as anyone who is also you. So that makes it a little bit easier to disentangle yourself from the karmic cords that you may have accumulated with other beings who are also you. And then you can, when you can fully understand those karmic cords, that's when you can alleviate or disintegrate the connection that's no longer serving you, that other person, or the collective. Meditation, dhyana. So meditation is so crucial. This is how we go about processing the karmic debris so it no longer causes these deviations from source. And it is not just seated on a Zufa cushion. So often we think of meditation, we think of the Vipassana retreats or sitting in lotus on top of a mountain. And again, they are spokes on a wheel. So this is so crucial. You want to actually practice moving meditation as you go about your practice. And I know that this might be challenging for some that only view yoga as a fitness class, but it's so exciting. Like, why not add the multidimensional aspect of self to your practice? It gives you so much motivation to expand consciousness and to move into new spaces. And of course, those of us that do like to just sit and meditate and don't want to integrate meditation into the physical practice, you get to a certain point where you become so familiar with your karmas and the emotions that are ruling you that it almost compels you to get moving, to actually immerse yourself in the karma yoga and take action. Because, and referring back to the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna claims, well, they're kind of like roommates. They're not that bad. And Krishna says, but if you knew what these roommates are capable of, taken across time and space, when they're brought to their brim with stagnant energy accumulation, and then they're actually compelled to manifest the pain and suffering that they're known for via a precipitating incident, then you would definitely make sure to eradicate those roommates. Honestly, I feel like they want to experience atonement. They're working to provoke us, to get us to hold space and to dance the Tandava in our sphere of existence. So meditation is really crucial, and it's so fun. I absolutely love meditating while practicing. It's a very psychedelic experience, and you don't even have to rely upon any external stimulants. So the meditation is exquisite, and the rabbit hole goes deep with this one. So you're able to process your karmic debris across time and space, as I mentioned with Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna and Krishna. So you can also, as I mentioned before with Dharana, you can remote view from multiple beings that you've interacted with and accumulated karmas with. You can also astral project into a future wherein the distortion no longer exists, and see what your life is like without the distortion and weigh that in comparison to if you were to hold on to that distortion, that illusion of separateness, how your future life, not even just future lives, but this future life and the future in this life, how things would play out in accordance with that distortion persisting in your field, how things would play out in accordance with that distortion being merged with the collective consciousness. And when you do weigh out all of your options, that's when I feel like the ego is really willing to relent, really willing to let go, finally, of that attachment. And so the complexity of our ability to analyze, it's so vast. And it's like whatever it takes for the ego mind to let go of its attachments to the holographic projected reality. And that's why I think sometimes we don't let go of things right away, because sometimes the inner technology isn't fully reactivated yet, and that attachment still needs to be witnessed from another dimension. So there's so much fun to be had with meditation. And I don't want you to completely cease doing seated meditation. That's still very useful. Again, like I said, you can work each of these limbs individually to really get that spoke on the wheel strong, so that when you start spinning the whole wheel and working all of them simultaneously, you really have a good awareness of how to access your ability to meditate with all this information that's coming through. And then I absolutely love that the 8th limb is Samadhi. That is so perfect. Samadhi is ecstatic joy, supreme bliss, and we're not seeking to arrive at enlightenment. We are finding so much joy in this process of enlightening our nadis, the tubular channels that life force energy flows through, and filling out our universal grid, that we are already there. We're already experiencing supreme bliss and ecstatic joy. And so that is an actual limb. And if you're not finding any joy in your process, reevaluate. Maybe you're trying to take off too big of a chunk of your karmic debris. We've spent centuries, lifetimes, whole generations, because we are everyone. So we spent generations of lifetimes accumulating these karmas together. We really should treat it like a 5-star dinner, I think, and really enjoy this disentangling of our quantum entanglement, right? Like taking a nice little bite and savoring each and every taste that comes up. And that is so sweet when you really enjoy it to the hilt. Then you're already there. It's not about trying to seek out nirvana. And even nirvana means to blow out or blown out. And as we know, we're infinite, so we can always expand into more space. We can always blow out more nadis and clear the karmic debris and become more expanded in our mental and physical states. And so it's best to just understand this nature of our existence, the paradox of our infinite nature. And in understanding this, it's like your ego just surrenders and enjoys the process. It does take some time though. And again, when you first start to get the Kundalini activation, I think more people will understand what I'm talking about. But these 8 limbs are so crucial. So have them memorized. I'm gonna do a series on the yamas and the niyamas to dive a little bit deeper into each of those individually. But have them memorized, because if you're living by the 8 limbs now, I think it'll make for a much more easeful awakening. And right now, I can guarantee that our planet is about to experience a massive Kundalini awakening. There's already people that have experienced a Kundalini arousal, and so they're working to conduct more energy or learning how to exist in this 3D reality with their nadis activated, and maybe perhaps the psychic nadis activated. And I can tell you across the board, our whole planet is about to awaken. And it's so crucial too. If you have these 8 limbs memorized, then you can really be a strong anchor that can help anchor this energy in so that everyone can experience a Kundalini awakening with grace and ease. Because as I'm sure a lot of you know, if you've done any research about Kundalini online, it can be a very volatile energy. And it is poisonous until it gets through the roof, through crown chakra. This is crucial because the Kundalini energy is, again, very, very powerful. And if you use it for self-seeking gain, you're going to accumulate a tremendous amount of karmas, which you don't want. So trust me on this one. If you have the time, just write out these 8 limbs, have them somewhere in your periphery so that you can commit them to memory. And it is so fun too to kind of gauge where you're at with your expansion work, and seeing how your relationship with the hologram, the holographic projected reality, Maya, the illusion, which is also us, changes over time, and how the attachments to Maya just kind of fall away like dead snakeskin. So hopefully this was beneficial, and thank you for watching. I'll be back with more yogic philosophy. Let me know down below if you have any requests, whether it be for expounding upon various philosophical concepts, or also various postures, transitions, again, because the physical body, the physical posture is important. And I really want to share as many downloads as possible here so that we can all expand and bring about this age of enlightenment, right? Satya Yuga, because it's here. We've all, I think, on a subconscious level, some of us on a conscious level have decided we're ready. We're ready to live in a highest vibrational frequency civilization wherein everyone is connecting to universal consciousness, and we're all aware through felt feelings, our oneness. And eventually we won't need to have these discourses and divulge through verbal utterances, because we'll all speak in terms of energy and telepathy. But for now, I am so grateful that we have this external technology wherein I can communicate these messages and transmit these alchemical properties to people all around the world. So again, if you have any questions at all, please don't be shy and feel free to leave a request down in the comments. And I'll talk to you next time. Namaste.